Hey there, everybody. I'm Robyn Gobbel, and we are going to spend the next hour talking about the relational neurobiology of opposition, defiance, and control. This is always such a hot topic, but I've found it's become even more prevalent in many families as we kind of get further and further and further into 2020. If you're listening to this recording far into the future, it is, what is it? September 30th, 2020. So put that into context with what's happening in the world right now. There's a lot going on. I'm thrilled you're here. I am coming to you from Grand Rapids, Michigan, where my family and I relocated about a year ago. Prior to moving here, I lived in Austin, Texas. I had a private practice where I saw kids and their families for therapy. My area of expertise and specialization has always been working with kids with complex trauma, kids who have been adopted, and their families. So if you're new to me, I'm thrilled you've found me, and I hope that you find the webinar super helpful. We're going to hit really hard this truth. And if you ever find yourself asking, oops, I'm sorry, my slide isn't advancing. There we go. Let me make sure this is working. Okay, perfect. If you find yourself getting stuck, and as we go through the webinar and after today, as you're trying to kind of reframe what's happening for your kids and their oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior, and you're finding yourself feeling flustered yourself or really wanting to ask that question, but just tell me what to do. Like, how do I fix this behavior? I want you to come back to this very first slide, because what I have found is that when we truly, truly, truly understand and completely commit to and believe in the neurobiology of being human, and specifically the neurobiology of being a relational and social human, that we can ease back into our own regulation and then find the answers we're looking to that question of like, but what do I actually do? That's almost always the sticking point when folks are starting to get really overwhelmed with like, well, how do I manage this behavior, this oppositional behavior, this defiant behavior, this controlling behavior? And I get that. And if we can pause, find a minute of our own regulation and slip back into what we completely know about the neurobiology of being a relational human, we start to discover the answer about like, what do we do next? The answer starts to emerge. So let's go through what I mean when I say the neurobiology of being relationally human. Dr. Steve Porges says connection is a biological imperative. So he's a scientist and a researcher. He's actually not in the field of psychotherapy or trauma therapy, although we have now like the field of trauma work and in the field of the relational neurobiology field has really connected with Dr. Porges. He didn't come to us from the relational neurobiology field. He came to us from a hard science field where he was doing research on neonates, on preemie babies. And I'm not going to go into all of this, but I will just say that he has come to the conclusion based on his research that connection is a biological imperative, meaning we're born with it, and except in extremely unique circumstances, like so unique, I want you to just assume that doesn't apply to you, that we can't lose this biological drive and pursuit for connection. This helps me, right? So when I'm with somebody who's being really oppositional, really defiant, really controlling, if I can just have a moment where my prefrontal cortex says, but remember, connection is a biological imperative. So what's going on here? That's my next question always. Like, this person's obviously not behaving in a way that's inviting connection. So what is going on here? Okay. Social baseline theory, which was brought to us by researchers Bex and Cohen, they have found that Connections actually are baseline. So in addition to it being this biological imperative, we're born with it, never goes away. Connections are default. It's our baseline. Like we expect connection. It's when we aren't receiving it that things go a little awry for us. And you know this actually, if you're here, that tells me that you're in relationship with somebody who demonstrates oppositional, defiant, and controlling behavior, right? So we know what that feels like for us when we're searching for connection and we want to be in connection with this person, but they're not giving connection back. That's when we feel off, right? Something isn't right. But connections actually are baseline. We expect it. This remains true about the children you're in relationship with who demonstrate oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior. It's that they have these two truths happening. There's the truth in them that is searching for connection and wants it because it's a biological imperative and is expecting it. And then for some other reason, and the reasons could be vast, and we'll get into those a little bit, there's also a part of them that is pushing away from or actively rejecting connection, right? Because that's what oppositional, defiant, controlling behavior does. It pushes away or rejects some connection. So when you hear me say connection is our default, it's a biological imperative, I don't say that to insinuate that your experience with this person isn't real. I get that you're having an experience with a child or even another adult where their behavior is not seeking out or inviting connection. That is 100% true. I totally believe that that's your true experience, as well as a part of that person's truth. A part of their truth is that they are actively rejecting connection. But there is also this other part of them that doesn't go away, that is always searching for and expecting connection. And so then that brings me to the question of what's going on, like what gives here, okay? The other thing that we can rest into when it comes to the science of connection is that the brain literally develops inside connection. The brain wouldn't develop if we weren't in a connected relationship. So it doesn't make any sense for there to be a part of us that is anything but expecting and desiring and defaulting to connection. Like we literally need connection with a safe, regulated caregiver in order for our brain to like wire up and bloom the neural connections that are being formed in those early months and years of life that we're watching happen, right? Like as babies grow up and we're watching their brain develop and bloom and wire and do all these really cool, amazing things. Those things only happen because that baby is experiencing a connected co-regulated relationship. So literally the human brain needs connection in order to develop. So that also means that literally the survival of the human species depends on having brains that are wired up for connection, right? So children become adults who theoretically procreate and keep our species going. So it doesn't make any sense from like a continuation of our species perspective to have anything but a brain that defaults to connection, that's expecting connection, that's looking for connection, that's designed to be in connection. Okay, so those are kind of my tidbits to help you with that, the neurobiology of being human. And opposition, defiance, and controlling behavior, it doesn't fit. Okay, again, I know that so many are like, okay, lady, that's great, but just tell me what to do. And we are going to get to a little bit of just tell me what to do. But truly, I promise you that in my entire career and in my journey as a parent and as just a human out in the world with other humans, that this is by far the most important piece, is to hold in our hearts this truth about the relational neurobiology of being human and that we are designed to be in connection. Connection creates safety. And safety creates connection, and connection creates safety, and safety creates connection, and connection creates safety. And it's one big, huge like kind of a never ending cycle that human beings experience connected relationships as safety, right? Human brains that haven't been hurt by connection experience connection as safe. And when human brains are feeling safe, they are available, yearning for, seeking, desiring connection. Okay, so it's this relationship that goes back and forth. Now, having a history of being in relationships that are that hurt isn't the only reason that a brain can start to be oriented more towards opposition, defiance, and controlling behavior, but it is one explanation for that. It's not the only one, though. And again, we'll look at a couple other explanations. So neuroception is this concept that's really at the crux of all of this. Neuroception is what I call like the spidey sense, right? That below conscious awareness, like way in the lowest parts of our brain, we're not thinking about it or noticing it, but way below any level of consciousness, we have this spidey sense that is always working to tell us if we are safe or not safe. Neuroception and safe or not safe, this is an on or an off thing, right? So our nervous system and our neuroception is either experiencing safety or not safety, danger, right? What is also true is that in addition to this, it's like a light switch, and I kind of think about it as like the light switch in my kitchen, right? It's either on or off, safe or not safe, but the light switch in my kitchen also has a dimmer switch. So I can be safe or not safe, and that's an on or an off, but then there's a dimmer switch on the level of how not safe I'm feeling. I can feel mildly not safe and actually still have a lot of good connection to my thinking brain, or I can be feeling like very not safe and be, full blown into a fight flight response. Neuroception is looking 3 places: inside, which means I, as a human, and we can think about this from our kids' perspective too, my brain is constantly scanning what's happening for me internally: heart rate, respiration, am I hungry? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Am I tired? Like all of my inner experiences. Neuroception is constantly checking in with those things to determine safe or not safe. So like if I was hungry, right, my neuroception kind of edges into not safe. And this again is completely adaptive. Our brains are always working to keep us alive. If I'm hungry, if my blood sugar is dipping, I have a part of my body that becomes aware of that. So I will do something about it. It's always working to keep me safe. Neuroception is also looking to the outside. And what that means is the environment. Where am I? What's happening in this environment? Is this a comfortable environment? Is this a familiar environment? It goes all the way down to like, is there a way out of this environment? Like, does this environment have a door, right? Think about all the places that you go that have doors everywhere, and think about how that place would feel different if there was no door, and how that would impact our sense of safety in that place, because there would be a sense of not getting out. But now, so this morning I had to go to the cell phone store because my cell phone isn't working and it needs to be fixed. And so I go to the cell phone store, and there's a lot of things going on right now because of the pandemic that help us feel safe or safer out in public. But as I imagine, what would have happened if I'd walked into that cell phone store and then all of a sudden I couldn't find the door? That would have absolutely triggered my uh-oh, this is not right kind of a sensation. Now, while I was there getting my phone fixed, did I have any awareness that oh, there's the door, I know exactly where it is, and now I feel safe? No, because it doesn't really work like that. I was way below conscious awareness. But there are these things that exist in our environment that help us to feel safe. So we did inside and we did outside. And then here's the third place neuroception is looking, which is in between. Okay, so is this relationship safe? Is the person that I'm with experiencing a sense of safety or not, because my spidey sense is so good that I can tell where your spidey sense is. Like maybe your spidey sense has clicked into the not safe realm. Well, that impacts mine. Okay, so that's the in between part, right? So we've talked about oppositional defiance and opposition, defiance, and control being counterintuitive to this truth about us as humans, that the connection is a biological imperative. So that's causing us to ask this question like, okay, so what gives? Why? And then we looked at neuroception and how our brain, well below conscious awareness, and in fact, it's happening 4 times every second. Every quarter of a second, our brain is scanning for cues of safety or cues of danger. And it's looking these 3 places: inside, outside, and in between. When we're neuroreceiving safety, our social engagement system is able to emerge. Okay. And our social engagement system is the part of us that rests into the safety of connection, that being in relationship and being in a connected relationship is safe. And it's what we prefer. It's our default, right? So I want to neuroreceive safety if it's accurate. And if I am experiencing safety, I am going to have the opportunity for my social engagement system, the part of me that has me connecting with other people in close relationships, that system has emerged. And truly, this is our preference. Our nervous system is always looking and seeking for the opportunity to move into and rest into our social engagement system. This is a core theoretical truth of mine as a clinician, and then now as a human out in the world. I learned about this because of my work as a clinician. And my theory is that every client who walks through my door has a part of their nervous system. It might not be one I see, but I trust that there's a part of their nervous system that exists that is longing for and seeking connection. And for the most part, even as a therapist, my primary objective is to create an environment, to create an experience for my clients that are offering up cues of safety. Knowing that if I offer up cues of safety from the inside, outside, and in between, that I can, again, for the most part, trust that their nervous system will do exactly what it's designed to do, which is to start moving towards and seeking connection. Now, there's no timeline on that. I have no idea how quickly that's going to happen. It depends on a lot of things. But as humans, like, we want to be in a connected, safe space. It's just simply how our brains have been designed. And I sometimes have clients in my office where if I didn't believe that actually totally in my bones, you wouldn't be able to convince me of it, right? It would be so easy for me to say, this person doesn't want connection at all. The last thing that this person wants is any kind of connection, or this child or the adult client, right? There's many instances, even for me as a therapist, where I have to completely believe this truth in my bones, because everything that's happening in front of me suggests that it's not true. And when I'm in that kind of a situation where it's like, I'm with somebody who is doing everything in their power to not be in a connected relationship with me, that's hard, right? Like, that's really triggering. I get controlling, I get oppositional, I get defiant, right? Like, even in my role as a therapist. So believing this truth totally in my core and in my bones, like, allows me to stay regulated and then get really curious. Opposition, defiance, and control are protective responses to cues of danger period, from the inside, from the outside, or from in between. That is why we have oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior. They are protective, adaptive behavioral responses to the brain neuroreceiving cues of danger. And there is no such thing as faulty neuroception. Our neuroception can't be wrong. Now, from a subjective standpoint, I certainly could be with somebody who is experiencing something as not safe, where I am looking at it going like, this is confusing to me. I don't understand this. What's happening right now is completely safe. Why is this person acting as though they're not safe or experiencing being not safe? So subjectively, two people can be having, wildly different senses of safety in the same experience. But each of us is having accurate neuroception for ourselves. There's no such thing as faulty neuroception. Our brain is taking in 11 million bits of data in every unfolding moment. And every moment, our brain is processing 11 million bits of data, but only 6 to 50 are explicit bits of data, meaning I'm only aware of between 6 and 50 pieces of data in every unfolding moment. I mean, that is such a minuscule fraction of the amount of data that's coming in. Yeah, Laura.
So can you give some more examples of what it would look like for parents offering cues of safety?
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that a little bit. Yes. And then I'm going to give you some more resources about where you can find more information about that specifically. Cool. Thanks, Laura. But that's a great question, because that is the crux of this, is how we offer cues of safety. Our subjective reality is completely created by our own brains based on not only what's happening right now, but based on all of our past experiences. So our brain's kind of primary function is memory and using our past to inform the present and predict the future. Okay, and this is good. We really are lucky that our brains work this way, or every single thing we did would be brand new, right? Like, imagine how cumbersome it would be if every morning we woke up and had no idea how to brush our teeth. Like, we had to Google even how to turn on our faucet, except for that doesn't even make sense, because we wouldn't even know what Google was, or what a faucet was, or what a toothbrush was, because we are constantly learning everything completely new in the moment, right? It would be impossible. Like, we couldn't live that way. So it's easy when I talk to parents about how the brain is kind of constructing its own reality based on the now and the past. Sometimes that can feel really overwhelming or almost unfair. Like, why does it have to work that way? So I want you to remember, like, no, it's good that it works that way. We really, really, really need it to work that way. And yes, sometimes there are some challenges that arise because of that. But the important part is to remember is that we can't get into like an oppositional or defiant debate with somebody about whether they're experiencing safety or not, because it's completely subjective and there's no such thing as faulty neuroception. I like to think of it as like these two streams that come together, the past and the now. They come together and they merge and they create something new, which is our present reality. And sometimes those streams are just really unbalanced. And the past stream is bigger and kind of floods or takes over, like crashes, like tsunami crashes into the now. So what that could maybe mean is somebody could look at me with some eyes of even like delight or happiness, or even just something totally neutral. But because of my past experiences, I see the way they're looking at me as like mocking, maybe. Or and then maybe I have like a shameful experience from that, or I feel rejected, which is a danger feeling, right? So the person didn't mean that. Like they were looking at me with some eyes of delight, but my past experiences tell me that nobody looks at me with eyes of delight. I don't even have a space for that to make sense in my brain. So I see your smile in response to something I just did as more of like a mocking or a shameful experience. And now I feel rejected, right? I could be asked to do something like in the here and now, like do my homework, do a chore, start to get ready for bed. But all of my experiences from the past have told me that anytime anybody asks me to do anything, I'm at risk, that something dangerous or scary might happen next, or something might happen that I can't predict or protect myself from. So from your experience, there's this very like, there's nothing dangerous here. All I'm saying is it's time to get ready for bed. Yes, that is 100% true. Your experience is that there's nothing dangerous here. Your experience is totally valid. And the other person's experience is totally valid too, because way that their brain comes up with their experience of the here and now is based on their own past, which is different than yours. We want to remember also, okay, so that was sort of one of the one reason why we can have this oppositional or defiant or controlling brain, because of the way we're experiencing reality, right? And that there's no such thing as faulty neuroception. Another experience that can contribute to an oppositional or defiant controlling brain is that your child's brain knows if your nervous system is either receptive or reactive, safe or not safe. A receptive, open brain is sending cues of safety. A reactive brain, that I'm in a sense of danger myself. And so I'm sending non-verbally, way outside of my awareness, quote unquote, cues of danger, because that child knows I'm in that state. Right. And so our children are determining their sense of safety or not safety based on how safe or not safe we're feeling. And it just goes without saying that there is a whole lot of reasons for grown-ups to not be feeling safe right now, right? Like we're 6 or 7 months in to a pandemic. We are launching ourselves into a pretty stressful and chaotic political time for those of us in the United States. Schooling is challenging. Those of us with special needs kids, kids that have brain-based differences are really struggling with maybe the fact that our kids aren't going to school, and somehow I'm supposed to be responsible for schooling this child who's already oppositional or defiant, right? So we're so stressed. Yes, of course. I mean, we're trying to do things that we've never been prepared to do, right? And our kids' teachers, like if your kid is going to virtual school, they're spending all day long, maybe, I know virtual school is working differently for different places, but they're spending time with adults who are super stressed, right? Makes total sense that they are. And man, as a therapist, I just can't stop thinking about those therapists who are straddling these two, different options of reality. And one is continuing to do, telehealth or teleplay therapy, especially with young kids, which is extremely challenging. Or, I go into my office and now I have the stress of what's happening with the pandemic, as well as the stress of all the additional responsibilities that I have to take care of because of the pandemic, all the extra cleaning, thinking about my toys. I mean, I'm not seeing clients right now. And when I see a lot of therapists for consultations, so I'm very touched into what's happening in the therapy world right now. The amount of stress that therapists are under right now is just enormous. So my point right now is that there is no shame if you're maybe thinking like, wow, my kid who feels oppositional, defiant, controlling is spending a lot of time with adults who are pretty stressed out. Well, of course they are. Of course they are. That is so That is so true. And that pulls up for me, and hopefully for yourself as well, a feeling of compassion. And you know what compassion is? Compassion is an opportunity to receive a cue of safety from ourselves. And then we can have some compassion for ourselves. We maybe might have the opportunity to kind of dip into a compassionate place, a more regulated place ourselves. And then now we are, without even changing our behavior, we're changing our inner cues. Now we're sending cues of safety to our kids. Another reason, and again, this is not by any means the totality of why kids could be experiencing, lots of cues of danger, really being in a neuroceptive danger reactive place right now, is how much sensory input they're receiving. And that kids have a threshold, almost like a thermostat of what's the right amount of sensory data for them. And for a multitude of reasons, some kids' thermostat is just a little bit different than other kids, or because of what's happening in the world right now, sensory lives are pretty different. And when we're getting too much or too little sensory data, things are too loud, how they smell, what they look like, what they taste like, all these, all this information from our sensory world, could be throwing our systems into neuroceptive danger. That's a way of cues of safety, both from the environment and internally, right? As my body responds to all the sensory data that's coming in from the environment. So again, these aren't the only reasons your kid's brain might be in this danger kind of reactive place. But these are kind of the top three that I see. And I also like to be really clear. I know a lot of people who tune in for my webinars and who train with me and read my writings are parenting kids who've experienced trauma, but oppositional defiant controlling behavior is not unique to kids who have experienced trauma. There are other reasons besides having a history of trauma for kids' brains to move into a more oppositional defiant or controlling place. All right, so what do we do about that? Well, the very first thing I invite you to do is just to have sort of really honest, compassionate self-reflection, right? Pause and ask yourself, how am I doing really? Am I feeling safe, or am I actually kind of feeling oppositional, defiant, controlling myself, right? And then how connected am I to this child in this exact moment when their behavior is hard for me to manage, but also overall, because I know in my family, as the stressors increase related to the pandemic and then other things that are happening in our family right now, as we get more stressed, as my husband and I get more stressed, we tend to find ourselves more disconnected from our son. And sometimes all of a sudden we're asking ourselves oh, oops, we have allowed ourselves to get further and further, emotionally disconnected from him. And I'll say, as a mom, I've been asking myself all these questions. We're a month into real live school here. And there's just a lot of stuff going on that makes so much sense that my son would be, again, having an increase in oppositional, defiant, and controlling behavior. And we are seeing those things. And so this is work that I'm doing as well. Lots of honest self-reflection. What's going on for me? What's going on in this kid's environment? How stressful is this kid's life? My kid's life is pretty stressful right now for him because of everything that's happening. How connected am I to this child? And my husband and I are regularly having those kinds of conversations. Oops, we've allowed ourselves to get more disconnected. These are not opportunities to shame ourselves or tell ourselves that we're doing something wrong. These are just opportunities for self-awareness, self-reflection, and self-compassion, because self-compassion will allow us to shift into more of a state of safety ourselves, and then we're sending those cues of safety. But I've also been known to tell people, yes, if we can, let's try to figure out the trigger, because if we know what the trigger is and we know what's causing this child to feel unsafe and causing the oppositional or defiant or controlling behavior, yes, let's try to figure that out. And the brain's taking in 11 million bits of data, right? That's a lot of things way outside conscious awareness that it's contributing to your child's sense of safety. And so, yeah, try to figure it out. But sometimes, again, I just have to shift back into that place of trust, like with what I believe about the neurobiology of being a relationally human person. I believe that if this person is acting in an oppositional, defiant, or controlling way, they must not be feeling safe in their nervous system right now. I don't understand why I'm not feeling that way. I don't know what the trigger is. I don't know what the cause of this is. And I'm going to trust that that is what's happening because there's so many things that their brain is taking in and responding to that's way outside my awareness or their awareness. So asking them or trying to figure out from them, like what's going on, right? We're getting a lot of I don't knows, aren't we? Ultimately, opposition, defiance, and control is about neuroceiving danger. This is how our brains work. And then control is a behavior that's all it but controlling behavior is our attempt as humans to restore that sense of safety. So getting controlling is what we do in response to not feeling safe. This is true about all of us. And if, again, we had some good, honest self reflection, we would see how all the times where it's true about us too, that as we get more stressed and we get more controlling, this is an adaptive response designed to help keep us safe. We either start trying to control the external environment or we start to control our inner experience. And so sometimes we have kids that get more controlling themselves. We see perfectionist behaviors, right? Or we see really rigid behaviors that aren't necessarily controlling the environment, or maybe they don't have that overt purpose. It's an internal attempt at control. So we definitely see both trying to control externally what's happening out here and the people I'm with and my environment. And sometimes there's an internal sense of control. Control is the behavioral response to not feeling safe and an attempt to restore that sense of safety. I feel like that's important for me to remember, that oftentimes people who are demonstrating controlling behavior, like long term, it isn't actually impacting their sense of safety in the world, but man, their body's really trying to. That might just be me, but that helps me again kind of shift back into that compassionate place, because nobody likes to be controlled, right? This is a huge trigger for most of us. This is a huge trigger for me. In the office as a therapist, controlling oppositional defiant behavior is probably the one thing that could cause me to stop being very grounded and maybe, disconnect from my best therapeutic self. And it's helpful for me to remember why controlling behavior happens and that it is their attempt at restoring a sense of safety. One more little science tidbit, y'all, is Bruce Perry's Arousal Continuum. I've taken out just the parts that are important for us here and put them on this slide for you. So if you look on the top row and you go left to right, Dr. Perry, who's the author of The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog and has brought to the world a neurosequential model therapeutics. He's one of the top international researchers in childhood trauma. He looks at what he calls the arousal continuum, and that our brains go from calm to alert to alarm to fear to terror. Okay. And if you go down just a couple rows, one of those darker pink rows where it says fight, flight, or watchdog brain, our brain, as it goes from calm to alert to alarm to fear to terror, goes from rest as calm to vigilance to alarm, or to alert, to resistance, which is maybe crying or oppositional behavior, right? To arousal, that's fear, right? Which is defiance. And then we move into terror, and that's aggression. I've written a couple articles recently on my blog about tracking arousal. And so if this piques your interest, you might want to head over to my blog and I'll link you to it in the follow-up email. For those of you who are here live today, that you can read a little bit more about this. But the research that Dr. Perry is putting out into the world is that oppositional behavior is about a brain in a state of fear, believing that there's danger, and in the alarm level of fear, right? Because remember I said, feeling not safe is like a dimmer switch, right? So alert is like one notch on the dimmer switch, and then alarm, and then fear, and then terror. And fear, when we're in that fear-based brain, we're moving into more active defiant behaviors. So there's alarm and the resistance and the fear and defiance. Truly reframing oppositional defiant controlling behavior is a behavioral intervention. I know it feels kind of soft and squishy, and it feels like it doesn't answer your question of just tell me what to do. And I want to offer up to you the possibility that it actually does answer that question. Just tell me what to do. Number one thing, reframe it as a neuroreceiving danger, a protective, adaptive response based on what's happening in their brain. It's a behavior intervention because it changes how we feel. It changes our ability to offer cues of safety because it allows us to rest back into a regulated state and we don't get controlling and defiant back. Now, I know a lot of you are saying like, yeah, I can do this fantastically outside the moment. Like there's probably some of you here who up until this point, you're like, I haven't even learned anything new yet, right? Like, you know, this science inside and out. But my guess is it's still really hard to hold on to this truth in the moment. Like when you're facing oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior in the moment, because man, it is triggering and it's not safe to be with somebody who's behaving oppositionally or defiantly or controlling, right? Because our brains are looking for connection. And that person's brain isn't available to offer it to me. We see that that's true because they're being oppositional, defiant, or controlling. So it's really easy then for me not to be able to stay grounded in this truth, in this reframe, in the actual moment. But we really, really, really need to keep trying to. And we really need to have faith that not only is that a behavioral intervention, but it truly is the most important in the moment behavioral intervention. That if I can keep my brain reframed about this behavior and why the oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior is happening, again, it's still a problem. We still have to address the problem, but I'm going to be addressing it with a brain that is sending off cues of safety. And then my child then has the opportunity to receive those cues of safety. Reframing this allows our own nervous system to rest back into that place of safety. I don't take the controlling behavior personally. I don't need to show my dominance to this oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior, right? I don't need to increase my child's neuroception of threats and increase their level of arousal by staying in my own, space of danger, my own space of threat. When I stay in that place and I start to come toe to toe with the oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior, and all of us have done this. I certainly have done it. I've probably done it in the last couple of days, right? All of us have moments where we come toe to toe with that behavior, and we have the sense that if we can be more oppositional, defiant, or controlling than that other person, then that will solve the problem. And I'm positive every single person here would say, not only have I tried that, it has never, ever, ever worked. It has never worked. We have never calmed or soothed our child's level of arousal by increasing our own. Okay, so I'm going to take you through briefly a 6-step process that you're not going to leave here because I teach it to you, you're not going to leave here and go like, oh yes, now I am completely competent at this 6-step process. But you're just going to practice. You're going to practice, and you're going to practice today, and you're going to practice tomorrow, and you're going to practice the next day. And in 3 months, you're going to have noticed that all of these practices made a difference. So the first thing you're going to do when you find yourself responding oppositionally, defiantly, and controlling to your child, oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior. Or actually, this would be a great moment for me to mention that some of us respond with helplessness, hopelessness, and give up. Right? We don't puff up in response to somebody's oppositional, controlling, or defiant behavior, right? We kind of collapse under it and have this give up, like, fine, just do whatever you want. Okay, that is a reasonable response. It's a response I'm very familiar with. It also, unfortunately, continues to send cues of danger to our kids for 2 reasons. One, because it's coming from a place of not feeling safe ourselves, but also because kids actually do really need us to hold boundaries and not give up on their negative behavior. When we hold compassionate boundaries and regulated boundaries, that's a way that we're establishing safety. So number 1, notice your reaction. Whoa. I'm starting to get controlling or oppositional, or I'm feeling the desire to just give up, get hopeless and helpless. Whoa, I'm starting to do this thing. And maybe just like my kid, it might be the same response that they're having. Maybe not. The first thing to do is notice, truly, like noticing in and of itself tends to bring just a click of regulation for us. Then don't argue with yourself. Like, don't say, oh, but this lady just told me that oppositional, defiant, and controlling behavior really means my kid is blah, 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 blah. So I really shouldn't be taking it personally, or I shouldn't be taking it as oppositional because she tried to tell me that that's not really what it's about at all. No. Okay. Don't argue with yourself, because that's not safe. Internally experiences safety either. Acknowledge that it's real. Like, I'm watching myself get oppositional, or I'm watching myself collapse into hopelessness because my own brain is constructing a reality that says this isn't safe. So it's real. How I'm feeling is a response to what my brain believes is happening right now. My brain must think this is pretty scary. Then there's a moment to offer some self-compassion. This is so hard. It's hard to parent this child. It's hard to be constantly on alert. It's hard for my own nervous system to be regularly going bananas. This is really exhausting, right? Now, those are a lot of words, and maybe they don't all even resonate with you. Maybe there are other words of self-compassion that resonate with you. It doesn't have to be a whole paragraph. I have actually found, like, this is so hard. Just an acknowledgement of how hard it is can be really helpful. Then you're probably going to do this naturally after you've gotten to that spot. But if not, take a really big breath with a really long exhale. Physically notice your shoulders and your fists and your eyes and relax them. Consider sitting down, getting lower than your child's eyes, sitting down or crouching down. Because if we're lower than their eyes, and I'm assuming this is safe. We're talking about oppositional, defiant, and controlling behavior. We are not talking about dangerous, violent, and aggressive behavior, right? So oppositional, defiant, controlling behavior, get lower than them, right? Send messages of, I'm safe, right? We want your child's brain to get cues of safety, a message that says everything's okay here. And you know that if you say that to your child, they don't believe you. So we're not necessarily going to be sending cues of safety with our words. We're going to do it with our own internal sense of safety, and then adjusting some of our nonverbal cues. Like if we are starting to get really, in our shoulders and our muscles are getting really tense and our eyes, right? We're going to just try to back that off. Okay. This one is really helpful to me, is that I bring to mind my people. the people in my world and in my life who in that moment, if they were there with me, they'd put their hand on my shoulder and they'd say, you're doing awesome right now. Or they might say, this is so hard. I totally understand why you're responding to your child like this. This makes perfect sense to me. We should work on responding in other ways, but it makes perfect sense to me why you're responding like this in this moment. Who are those people in your life? It's really helpful to bring them to mind. It activates a place in your brain that brings more regulation, compassion, and connection into your own nervous system when you bring to mind people who offer you connection and regulation, even when they're not there. And then offer yourself some kindness. Go past the self-compassion of how hard it is and give yourself some affirmations. I'm doing the very best that I can. I really, really love this child. It's just that this is really hard. So again, this is not a 6-step process that now that I've taught it to you, you're going to be an expert at. But I do know that there's a lot of you who registered for this webinar who know a lot about the neurobiology of the brain already. For some of you, totally brand new. For some of you, it's not brand new, right? And you do understand and know these things, but hanging on to them in the moment is really, really, really hard. So doing this process and practicing it repeatedly, really trying to practice it, will allow you to develop the internal regulation where you'll be able to stay grounded kind of in your own ability to sense cues of safety, even when our kids are behaving oppositionally, defiantly, or controlling. So without a doubt, oppositional defiant behavior is best handled by proactively creating felt safety. And so we talked about creating felt safety is about, noticing the inside and the outside and in between. That's a totally other webinar since I do these really short webinars. I can only do kind of one topic at a time. I do have a creating felt safety webinar. I also blog about all this stuff. So there's lots of free resources out there available for you too. But the best way truly to tackle oppositional behavior is not in the moment. It is by trying to create an environment that offers up felt safety to our kids. The alarm and the fear brain, right? The alarm brain was where the oppositional behavior is coming from, and the fear brain is where that defiant behavior is coming from. They need soothing first, okay? Then we address the opposition and defiance, right? Attempting to address the oppositional or defiant behavior while our children are in that level of arousal. Yeah, I know we've all tried it and we're not successful at it because it doesn't work. The brain just doesn't work that way. So the first thing we do is soothe the brain and then attempt to offer up, strategies to address the opposition and defiant behavior. That said, I am going to walk you through just a couple kind of scenarios and scripts that I have worked with families and also in my own family have found these to be helpful. They might not be helpful in the moment for you for a lot of different reasons, but one is you may just really need to focus on calming and soothing that arousal-based brain. But here's a few scripts that might be helpful or come in handy. So the first thing you really want to do is truly keep your own, I call them X-ray vision goggles on, and really work hard to continually see beneath that behavior. Opposition to defiance very likely could be saying to you, I can't do what you want me to do. So I'm thinking about the kids in my office who are struggling so much at school and they're refusing to do their schoolwork. And not only are they refusing to do their schoolwork, but they're like cussing out their teachers or maybe like running away. Right? So we have to believe them. Like we have to believe that they don't have the language to say, I can't do this. But clearly that's what their behavior is saying. It's too much. I can't do this. Now we certainly need to look at why that's true in a different situation, in a different time. We can reflect on that. But in the moment, I really see repeatedly over and over and over again having to support adults in believing that the behavior that says, I can't do this right now is real and we need to believe them. And the truth is, y'all, I know this is true in my house. Like if my son was, having a really hard time with his homework and maybe he had a really long day or he just doesn't understand it, or maybe he does understand it, but he's super stressed and he just can't use that thinking part of his brain anymore. If he came to me and he said, Mom, my thinking brain is just really stressed right now and I can't do my math homework right now. I'd have to be in a pretty special place for me to be able to respond to something like, oh, buddy, gosh, thanks for using your words and telling me that. Absolutely. Let's think about, what we need to do to help your brain so that you'll be able to do your homework later, right? Like, I think the reality is that most of us would respond to a kid, especially if we're not perfectly regulated. Most of us would respond to a kid saying that with like, tough. Like, you got to figure it out. Like, your math homework is due. Let's figure out how we can get this math homework done. And we might not be as, abrasive as tough, but we would kind of hear their words maybe, and then insist that they do it anyway. So when I think about it like that, I'm like, gosh, doesn't it make sense that kids have escalated to behaviors to tell us, I just can't do this thing you want me to do right now? I remember the moment in my life as a therapist when I really like had this aha moment of like, oh my gosh, we just need to believe them. We just need to believe them. They can't do it right now. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to us. It doesn't matter if it feels fair or right or just, or if 5 minutes prior they could do it. None of that matters. In this moment, their behavior is saying, I can't do it right now. And we need to believe them. And then try to say what you see. Right. So I think what I'm seeing is that this math sheet feels too overwhelming to you right now. Or, it's too hard to talk about this right now. Right. So this just goes back to, we need to believe them. Even if the child hasn't said, this is too hard for me right now, say what you know is beneath that behavior. Right. When they're like, oh my gosh, I remember my child just like sprawled out on the floor and like, flailing and screaming. And in my brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, if you would just sit down and do this homework, like we'd be done with it by now. But this is going to take 3 hours if you keep behaving like this. Right. Like I have those thoughts too. And that he's not telling me this is too much for me right now. He's just flailing about, right? So I want to see the beneath that behavior and then say what I see, like, oh man, it is too much to focus on this right now, right? Let's figure out how to help your brain feel less overwhelmed, right? Say what we see and believe what their behaviors are telling you. Oh, I'm noticing, sorry, y'all, my clock is kind of in a place where it's like perfectly positioned in a way I can't really see it. I'm noticing we're already about 5 minutes over the top of the hour. So if you're still here, but you've got to pop off, don't worry about it because you're going to get this recording and you're going to be able to check out the last, like probably 10 minutes at the most. Okay. But I am going to keep going. So I have found this to be extremely helpful intervention, both in my life as a therapist and in like my personal life out in the real world with my kid and with other people I'm in relationship with with. So when I'm with somebody who is being oppositional, being defiant, being controlling, I want to ask myself in my head, what am I feeling right now? Okay, and I want to get real honest about that and not judge myself for it, right? So I'm going to get real honest with like, how am I feeling right now that I'm in relationship with somebody who's being oppositional, defiant, or controlling? And I want to consider the possibility that that might be how my child is feeling, and this is how they're communicating it to me. So I might notice that being ignored makes me feel invisible. Or I might notice that I'm feeling completely out of control right now, right? That's how I tend to feel when I'm with somebody who's being super controlling, is I start to feel really controlling, and it's just like feeling inside my chest and my stomach. Or maybe it's that I'm totally powerless. I have no voice. I can't control anything. Or maybe it's like this indignant voice that's like, this is so disrespectful. I will not be disrespected. No judgment. We're just checking in with what is my authentic, honest experience right now. And then see if that gives you any clues for how your child is feeling. Okay. That is often how relational experiences work, is that with our behaviors, we kind of set the other person up to feel how we feel, that we either don't know how we feel or we don't know how to put words to it. So we behave in ways that causes the other person to feel exactly how we feel. And so I'm not saying this is a surefire or that you can always depend on this to be true, but it's worth being curious about. And then maybe even saying it out loud. So you remember the previous slide, it was, I'm feeling invisible. And so I might just like wonder out loud, I wonder if you ever feel invisible in this family. Or I might say, wow, there are just so many things out of your control, aren't they? And these might feel like totally random things to say, like they don't fit the conversation at all. But you notice yourself like, I am feeling so controlled right now and I hate it. And then you might say out loud, like, wow, dude, there are so many things out of your control right now, aren't there? Right. Or I might just muse randomly, you know, being powerless is crummy. It's a terrible way to feel. Right? Or I wonder if you ever feel like we don't respect you. Now you have to be prepared for the answer. If you offer a question like that, you have to be prepared for your child to say yes and for you to, continue to hang in that conversation. But I really couldn't tell you how many times I've had a moment of connection with a child by doing this, by musing out loud. I wonder if, like, gosh, I'm wondering, again, it sometimes will feel totally out of the blue. Like it makes no sense to what's happening or what y'all have even been talking about. It can feel like it really comes out of nowhere. So often I have had moments of like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Now you have a moment of connection. Now you have a moment of regulation. Now you have a moment of being seen and felt for the child. And now we're increasing the opportunity for opposition, defiant, controlling behavior to decrease. So just try that one. Try noticing what you feel and then musing out loud and asking your kid if they happen to ever feel that way or if they feel that way in that moment. Your child's completely ignoring you, right? Like this is a tough one. Being totally stonewalled, blatantly ignored is so hard and so triggering. So here's what I would say to that. Like, hey, buddy, can you let me know that you heard me, right? When you don't answer me, I only can guess what's going on. If you could find words to tell me what's going on, we can work together to solve this problem. So let's just use a really simple example of like you call your kid for dinner and they just totally ignore you. They don't even come. Like, hey, I need to at least know that you heard me, right? And then maybe you're completely ignored again. And then like, I'm getting the feeling that you don't want to stop doing what you're doing and come to dinner. But because you're not using your words, all I can do is guess. And I'd really rather know what the real problem is from your words instead of me just guessing. Do you think you might be able to find the words to tell me what's going on so we can work together? Now, here's the thing. Our kids with oppositional, defiant, and controlling behavior, they're pretty dysregulated. They might not have access to words. So if they don't answer you, okay, I mean, it was worth a shot. The other thing to think about is that your kid needs to know, like from outside of this moment, that their words matter. So for example, I have a kid whose like love language is like relational connection and attention. Super extroverted. He's very talkative. He wants to be engaged with. And especially when he was younger, right? Like all kids do, he had all sorts of fascinating behaviors that would get me to pay attention to him, except for then, unfortunately, the attention wasn't very positive because I was really frustrated. And so we got to a point where I taught him to say like, hey, mom, I need you to pay attention to me. Now, the kicker was, especially at the beginning of teaching him this, if he used those words, hey, mom, I need you to pay attention to me, I needed to do it. I had to prove up that if he would use words instead of behaviors, he would get his needs met. And then a combination of him developing trust in that and his brain growing, so he had better regulatory circuits as he got older. Now I can say, yeah, buddy, just 1 minute. I'm in the middle of this thing. I've got to finish it, right? So he has learned to have patience, and that when he says, I need attention, I don't have to like drop what I'm doing and instantly say, yes, I'm here. Let me give you attention. He can wait now. But I first had to prove up, yes, I will listen to your words if you tell me what those words are. So take that example and put it kind of in the context with whatever the struggles are for you. Like, what if your kid did tell you what the real problem was? What would your response to that be? Because a lot of us, our response is like, well, that's great. Like, I hear your problem, but kind of tough. Like, we have to do this thing anyway. And if that would be the responses your kid's expecting, again, it makes a lot of sense that they're just using behaviors, right? How about when our kids do exactly the opposite of what we've asked them to do, right? So the first thing I want to do is assess the level of danger, right? And if the level of danger is low, then I want to look for a way to connect with this kid. Again, be offering cues of safety, establish connection. People who are connected to one another are generally relatively cooperative, right? So when my kid won't get out of bed, if again, this is a low danger situation, I'm not in danger, he's not in danger, the first thing I want to do is just find a way to connect, offer some sort of almost like a little olive branch, like, it's feeling really hard to get out of bed right now, I'm going to come right back with a drink, do you want juice or milk? And if they don't answer you, like, do your best to guess what you think they're going to want and then still come back with that. How about having no screamed in your face, right? This is a big topic. Like, this is a whole nother, lengthy webinar of matching the energy, not the dysregulation. But I like to offer it up because it's important. And I think it's something that is easy to overlook. That if your kid is screaming no at you, you don't want to scream back. That'd be scary. And now that's cues of danger. But our nervous systems need to be matched. Our energy needs to be matched. We just want to try to match them with regulation, right? Like, I can have energy in my nervous system without being scary, right? And so I might reflect back something like, whoa, wow, you really don't want to do that. Right? I had a conversation with someone online once who was saying that their kid was just screaming, like would just piercingly scream. And the parent was trying really hard to say, like, first attune to it, like, wow, like, you're being really loud right now. You can't scream like that, right? A really quick move into, but we can't scream like that. It hurts people's ears. And my suggestion was try to just drop that second part, because the complaint was the child was continuing to scream anyway, and in fact, escalating. And so, like, well, she's continuing to scream and she's escalating anyway, then you really don't have anything to lose by dropping that second part, right? The part that was like, but we can't scream like that, it hurts people's ears. So first, just like match the energy. Wow, you're really screaming right now. Wow, you really don't like that. Or you really don't like what I had to say. And then just pause and kind of see what happens next. Again, you really don't have anything to lose. And then if none of these things work, right? There's, so much more that we could go into, but here's my primary thought on that is we need to ask ourselves these three questions. If I'm not doing anything that's effective at helping my kids' oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior. Number one, is this child truly regulated? Number two, is this child feeling connected to me and to themselves? And number three, is this child truly experiencing felt safety? Are those things true right now in this moment? And are they true overall? Excuse me there. Then you want to address that, right? So one of those, the answer to one or two or all three of those is no. If you're experiencing opposition, defiance, or controlling behavior, this child's not regulated, or they're not feeling connected to you or themselves, or they're not experiencing felt safety. That's what we have to address, which is so hard because we want to address the bad behavior. But we've got to go underneath that and look at, how do I address the regulation? How do I address the connection? How do I address the felt safety? Now, if you've trained with me before, you've heard me say a million times, regulation, connection, felt safety. If you're new to me, because I know a lot of you here today are new to me, I am going to run a free short, just 45 minutes kind of masterclass next week on the concepts of regulation, connection, and felt safety. And I'll be sending the information out to all of y'all. If you're new to me, it's going to be a review, but reviews are sometimes good and they kind of help us with our own regulation. If you're not new to me, that's going to be a review. But if you're new to me, you might be going like, okay, great. This is all really fantastic information, but I'm still pretty confused about regulation, connection, and felt safety. So I'm going to attempt to help y'all out with that next week. So here's just a really quick review of everything we went over today. I think it's really helpful to organize the last hour for ourselves, where we're going to fiercely commit to the neurobiology of being relationally human. Opposition, defiance, and control isn't being in connection, right? So then we got to get curious. What's up with that? Like, what's going on? Is this child being flooded by the past and responding to their own neuroception that's being intruded upon by past experiences? And that's often the case with our kids who've experienced trauma. Is there a lack of felt safety in this moment because of what's happening for me or what's happening in the environment, which is, again, I think true for a lot of us right now? Is there maybe too much or too little sensory data? This whole webinar has been really talking about neurotypical brains. And when we start to look into like neurodivergent brains and the diagnosis of autism, it gets a little bit more nuanced and starts to leave my scope of practice. So I don't often talk a lot about the neurodivergent brain, but it's a very valid experience. And there's places you can go to learn about opposition, defiant control in the neurodivergent brain or with kids on the spectrum. And then the reality is, it really doesn't matter why, right? Because we've fiercely committed to the truth of the neurobiology of being relationally human. And so we know it doesn't really matter why, we just know that they're neuroreceiving danger. And that's why we're seeing oppositional, defiant, or controlling behavior. So that we're going to practice reframing that belief in the moment. In the moment of being confronted with oppositional, defiant, controlling behavior, we need to practice that. I gave you 6 steps for that. And then we're going to soothe the alarm or the fear brain in our kids, if possible, right? We're going to really try to get their brains back into a calmer state and then address the behaviors. And then I gave you a handful of scripts that you can just try in the moment. So this, again, if you're not new to me, you know this is so typical of me, is that I tend to go long. I put too much information into things. So those of you who are still here, I'm thrilled that you're still here. This is where you can find me. I blog really regularly. I have a lot of webinars that are available. Again, I'm going to have this free masterclass next week. Laura, are there any lingering clarification questions that I want to get to before we sign off? Laura, you're going to have to unmute yourself. Well, I'm going to assume that that her response is no, since I'm not hearing from her. And yeah.
What was your question?
Is there any lingering clarification questions that have come in?
Nope.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Let's take time to just thank Laura for being here and for helping out those of you who have been writing in with questions. I'm thrilled you guys have been here today. Thank you very much. You're going to get the recording to this webinar within the next 24 to 48 hours. You'll be able to watch and review it as often as you'd like. Thanks, everybody.